A nightmare on Peppa's street. Peppa was lying in her pink little bed under a soft blanket. It was time to sleep, but something was wrong. The room slowly sank into the darkness of evening. Shadows on the walls began to move strangely. Peppa closed her eyes and tried to fall asleep, but sleep brought her not sweet dreams at all. In her dream, Peppa found herself at the familiar playground, but the swings creaked frighteningly in the silence. The slide was covered with rust and looked old. None of her friends could be seen nearby. Suddenly, a dark figure appeared from around the corner. It was a strange man in a striped sweater. On his hand was a terrible iron glove. Finger blades gleamed ominously in the moonlight. Peppa tried to run away, but her legs wouldn't obey. The nightmare man slowly approached her. He laughed with a low, frightening voice. The echo of laughter spread across the empty playground. Peppa woke up in a cold sweat at home, but the room looked somehow different. Toys were not in their usual places. Mr. Dinosaur was looking at her strangely. Peppa went downstairs to Mummy and Daddy, but there was nobody in the living room. The television showed only gray noise. The clock on the wall stopped at midnight. Suddenly, Peppa heard the creak of floorboards upstairs. Someone was walking around her room. She slowly climbed the stairs back up. The door to her room was slightly open. Inside stood that same scary man. He smiled a terrible smile right at her. Peppa wanted to scream, but her voice disappeared. Freddy stretched his iron hand towards her. Suddenly, everything vanished in a bright flash of light. Peppa woke up in her little bed again. Mummy Pig looked into the room with a smile. Morning had come, but fear remained in her heart. Peppa told Mummy about the scary dream, but Mummy just stroked her head gently. Outside the window, the bright sun was shining as always, but Peppa knew he would come back again. In the window's reflection, a familiar shadow flickered. Freddy Krueger was waiting patiently for the next night. Peppa went downstairs to have breakfast with her family, but she had no appetite at all. George was playing with his dinosaur happily. He didn't know about the nightmares yet. The day passed as usual, but evening was approaching. Peppa was afraid to go to sleep again. When night came, she squeezed her eyes shut tight, but in her dreams, Freddy was already waiting for her. The Enchanted Family. A sunny morning in the Pig family house. Peppa woke up and stretched in her little bed. George was playing with his dinosaur in the nursery. Something strange was happening outside the window. Mummy Pig was making breakfast in the kitchen. She noticed the silence in the yard. Daddy Pig was reading his newspaper in the living room. His eyes became cloudy and empty. Peppa came down the stairs to her family. Daddy slowly turned his head towards her. In the kitchen, Mummy stood motionless. Her hands were trembling over the frying pan. George came out of his room with his toy. His walk became strange and unsteady. Peppa called for Mummy, but there was no answer. The family looked at her with empty eyes. Zombie neighbors appeared in the yard. Susie Sheep was walking towards the house with slow steps. Peppa looked out the window with fear. All her friends had turned into zombies. Grandpa Pig knocked on the door. His knocking was slow and eerie. Peppa locked herself in her room. Strange sounds could be heard behind the door. The family gathered at Peppa's door. They quietly scratched at the wooden surface. Peppa hid under her blanket. The house filled with ominous rustling sounds. Madame Gazelle peered through the window. Her eyes glowed in the darkness. Peppa realized she was all alone. The whole world had turned into a nightmare. She quietly began to cry under the blanket. Hungry moans could be heard from outside. The door slowly began to open. Peppa closed her eyes in fear. The zombie family entered the room. They reached out their hands towards her. Peppa woke up in a cold sweat, but outside the window there was still darkness.